Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Simply Trade podcast, your go-to source for practical insights on global trade, compliance, and the systems that power them. I will be your host, Annik, as I am every single week. I know, I'm so excited to have you back. Today I have an interesting topic. I say this all the time, but truly this is something I have not touched on. And we're going to be talking a little bit on a higher level than I think I would usually. So I'm kind of excited to learn more and get into this topic. So if your organization is running SAP GTS 11, chances are you've already started asking the questions, when do we move to GTS edition for S4HANA? And how do we do it without derailing our compliance operation? This is one of the most significant transitions trade and IT teams are navigating right now, which I had talked to the team, and it seems like Europe is a little bit on a different schedule than America is in this, and we'll talk through that. So joining us today are Robert, I'm going to butcher your last name, Robert
Wieczorek?
Wieczorek.
Yes. Yes,
Wieczorek.
exactly.
That, that is not German. We both speak German, but that is not a German last name. So usually I would be great, but right now it's not in my favor. Yes. So he's a senior project manager for SAP GTS at Corporate Business Solutions. And I have also with me in the studio, virtual studio, Christine Tully, SAP GTS advisor at Corporate Business Solutions. So together, they're going to bring you hands-on experience guiding companies through exactly this kind of conversion and learning more about the system and why it is so crucial to transition and why this is not just an Apple kind of upgrade transition. So you know how you update your phone and it's the easiest thing, takes 10 minutes, everything is back to where it was, you have new emojis. Well, that is not the case when you're upgrading with the system. And I think this is the easiest way to describe it for me. Now, I want to give you guys a chance to introduce yourself real quick. And I want to thank you guys for being here with me. And I'm excited to talk about this topic. So, Christina, if you want to start.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for the introduction. So I've been at CBS for a little over a year now. And as you said, I'm an SAP GTS advisor. My focus within SAP GTS is specifically in customs management. And I've spent over about 5 years now working in the international trade and customs space.
Yeah, great. Well, it'd be great to hear from you, Robert.
Yeah, my name is Robert Wieczorek. I'm with CBS for almost 13 years now. The first 11 years out of Germany, and for the last 2 years, I'm responsible for the GTS practice for corporate business solutions here in the US.
Awesome. Yeah, I know that corporate business solution is based in Germany, right?
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Which is
we are
amazing.
originally from Germany. Yeah.
Where is it? What's the city?
It's in Heidelberg.
Oh my God, that's gorgeous. Yeah. Well, anyone wants to visit? That's amazing. Now, I want to quickly touch on the basics of the SAP GTS 11 or an SAP GTS in general. What does it do? What is it? Why do companies use it? Because kind of to set the ground and the baseline of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I can give an overview of it. So SAP GTS really helps companies manage international trade more efficiently and more accurately. It automates core trade processes so organizations can control their costs, so they can reduce the risk of penalties and also speed up both inbound and outbound customs clearance. The solution of SAP also centralizes trade compliance management, so bringing master data and trade content into one place. This makes global trade oversight much more simpler, more consistent, and far easier to manage across the entire supply chain. So overall, SAP GTS enables faster, more reliable cross-border operations while helping companies stay compliant and reduce the cost and complexity of global trade.
Right. And I want to quickly touch on this. So AI is becoming, a huge phenomenon in trade right now. What is there a huge difference?
Yeah, it grows and grows for sure. Yeah, for in GTS 11, there was already things like machine learning and so on, especially for the classification part. But the whole SAP strategy, yeah, SAP itself is usually pretty conservative. Yeah, they are reaching out for AI solutions like hell.
To start us off, I want to ask, why is the transition from SAP GTS 11 to GTS E4H such a hot topic right now?
Mhm.
And why is it even hotter in Europe?
Yeah.
That's a valid question because you don't hear this often here.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah,
Go ahead, Robert.
yeah, exactly. No, it's the Christine will tell you about the timeline and so on from Edition for HANA. And from European perspective, the companies are more eager regarding the conversion to GTS. The US is a little behind. Yeah, they do not use the GTS systems in several parts so extensively, and therefore they are more convenient with their GTS 11 solution. But therefore, it's a hot topic in the US even more than in Europe.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I bet that Corporate Business Solutions (CBS) is educating the US market on this as well as the European market, right? You guys are providing a broad spectrum of this solution and helping companies transition, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so Corporate Business Solution itself, we were founded 30 years ago out of Germany. And we're from two former SAP employees. And right now in 2026, we are engaged more than 1,800 employees worldwide, with 40 international offices and hundreds of international customers, and not just in the GTS area, but also in every SAP aspect you can imagine.
Yeah. So there's more to that. But today we're only covering SAP GTS, right?
Today, here's just two people from
Mhm.
Corporate Business Solutions just for GTS. Yes.
Okay, so clearly it's a hot topic and that we're talking about it. But is it too late to talk about this subject for companies right now?
No, I would say it's very timely and it's definitely not too late. SAP GTS 11 maintenance officially ended in December 2025. So companies that are still running on it are now operating without full support. So that creates real risks, not just technically, but also from a compliance and audit perspective as well. What's interesting is that despite this deadline, more than 50% of GTS systems globally haven't been converted yet. So there's still a huge backlog, and companies are now under pressure to act. At the same time, though, many organizations are moving to S4 HANA, and that's really what's accelerating the topic. So GTS E4H is built to integrate natively with S4. Yes, you can connect GTS 11 to S4, but it's more complex, it's less efficient, and it's really not aligned with SAP's long term roadmap. So it becomes a temporary workaround rather than a long term solution. Um, from a technical and functional perspective, S4 has changed quite a bit. For example, some functionalities that used to be in ECC, like preference management, they're no longer available in S4 at all. So that pushes companies to rethink how they handle these processes, and it often shifts them into GTS. We also see companies underestimating the effort. They think we'll just upgrade the system, like you said, with an Apple upgrade,
Yeah.
comparing it. But in reality, it's much more closer to a transformation. So, from our experience, having converted more than 40 systems globally, worldwide, the key message is this is not a plug and play situation. It requires business involvement, data cleanup, testing, strategic decisions. And if companies delay too long, they not only face constraints, but also they risk running into rushed and high risk projects later on down the line.
Yeah, that sounds like a complex issue. Like there needs to be help, right? So I'm
Yeah.
wondering at a high level, how is a GTS 11 to S4 HANA conversion different from a typical SAP upgrade? Because I think there probably are distinctions, right?
Yes, exactly. And they're all pretty often underestimated. So the biggest difference is that it's not an upgrade. Yeah, it's a conversion or even a transformation.
Okay.
In a typical upgrade, you keep your architecture, you just move to a newer version. Yeah, with GTS Edition for HANA, the system is rebuilt specifically for HANA, and there are real functional and structural changes. Yeah, that's a good example here is the user experience. In GTS 11, users worked with classical, old-fashioned sub GUI transactions. In Edition for HANA, business processes are moved to the modern Fiori apps, so the web-based solutions. Overall, that sounds simple, but in reality, it changes how users work day by day, actually. Yeah, for example, instead of navigating multiple transaction codes to release blocked documents, you have now a single Fiori app that consolidates those steps. Yeah, so combined, that is more efficient, but it requires a retraining and a process adjustment for sure. From technical perspective, it's also significant. SAP had deleted or deprecated up to 1,600 data dictionary objects in their repository. So if you have custom code developments, as most companies do, for sure, you need to check whether they will still work and process the custom code conversion. Here, another example, we've seen customers with export license determination logic built years ago and still running. In addition, for HANA, the underlying database tables changed. So the logic is no longer working. That forced them not just to rethink from their side, but also from our side to provide a redesign solution, not just fix the code from technical perspective, but as well from functional and business perspective.
Yeah. Go ahead. It's because I just wanted to jump in and say I would think this is really important because trade is such a important, how do you say, industry where no mistakes should be made. And I think I don't want to say updating, but converting the system means there probably is more errors and mistake. I'm gonna use the phone again. If you don't convert your phone or upgrade your phone, you're gonna run into issues. The phone slows down. Apps stop working. Well, I would think that in a company that is a big deal, and there's loss of money, slowed down processes, and it's something that just companies cannot afford, especially now with the tariffs.
Yes, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And from real life perspective, you have the example that trucks are not leaving your yard without the proper papers and the
Yeah,
proper customs declaration, and we have to avoid this for sure.
right. Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, that's okay. That's okay. We always love to implement real life examples. But to round up the explanation of the conversion, another big subject here is authorizations. So with Fiori, you do not just assign T codes and roles like before. You design additionally objects like different types of catalogs, spaces, pages, sections, and so on. This means a complete redesign of the authorization concept itself. Yeah, and finally, yeah, you mentioned it already. GTS is not a passive system. It directly controls business critical processes like shipment, release, or custom filing. So if something doesn't work in this live environment, it immediately impacts crucial operations. And
And
that's why testing and business involvement, sorry, the last
yeah,
sentence here, are far more intensive compared to a typical upgrade. Yeah.
right. I see the picture now, and you're talking about impact. So impacting the success of a GTC conversion. How is that done by brokers, content providers, logistics system? How do they impact the success of such a conversion?
Yeah. So the ecosystem, I would say, for GTS is one of the most underrated aspects of a conversion. GTS sits in the middle of a very complex landscape. It connects to ECC or to S4. It connects to customs brokers, connects to logistics providers, connects to screening content providers, and also sometimes middleware like Seaburger. And each of these integrations needs to be checked and tested during a conversion. So, for example, you could have a project where everything works well internally perfectly in GTS, but the customs broker interface had not been validated for E4H. So, and what I mean by validated is it's not been fully tested and it's not confirmed working. So this could cause customs messages to fail, causing delays in shipments down the line. Another common challenge is coordination. So when you have external providers like brokers, like content providers, like converter providers, they often have their own timelines and they also have multiple other customers to support. It's not just your company. So if they're not aligned with your project schedule, you also risk delays there. And then there's also one other aspect is their certification. Not every third party solution is automatically compatible with GTS E4H. So companies need to actively verify this to make sure their, external content providers and brokers fit with the system. So the key message really here is success doesn't depend only on your system. It depends on your entire ecosystem being ready.
Right. Yeah, I see the
Mhm.
importance of that. And I think that's important on all levels of systems because there's
Mhm.
so many different areas of trade that need to be connected. Now, I think something for companies is important, the standardization versus the customization. So how should companies decide what to standardize versus what to keep customized in S4HANA?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, it's truly a key strategic decision. E4H is a great opportunity to move closer to SAP standard. So over customization often increases complexity, cost, and long-term maintenance effort. Um, there's also a strong trend right now toward a clean core approach. So this means keeping the SAP system lean and moving custom logic to external platforms like BTP. So the goal really should be to standardize wherever possible and only customize where it truly adds business value.
I love that. Yeah.
Mhm.
And I think it kind of aligns with the message of AI. You shouldn't, change everything or customize everything. You kind of need to plug it in. Now, I know there's probably a lot of misconceptions in this in this area, as there is in all areas and systems that are technical. But and and I think one of the things as well is I'm not sure how the misconception can be that valid, just because we did talk about how this system, the SAP GTS 11, is kind of running out. Like it's not as efficient as it was. That's why you have to convert. Now, I do want to ask, what are the most common misconceptions on, that companies first talk about in a GTS conversion?
Mhm. Yeah. I mean, I know we talked about this a little bit already, but one of the biggest misconceptions is that it's just a technical conversion, switching from GTS 11 to GTS E4H. But in
Hmm.
realities, it's much closer to a transformation. For example, sometimes companies approach it as a simple technical upgrade, but then during testing, they may discover that certain compliance processes behave differently due to changes in the data model in GTS E4H. So this can lead to late stage redesign and in some cases, significant project delays. Another common misconception is underestimating the importance of testing during a GTS E4H conversion. Um, in GTS, testing really cannot be limited to individual functions. It really requires the full end to end scenario. So, for instance, sales order and delivery for compliance checks, and then also testing the invoice to create a customs declaration. If any step in the chain fails, the entire process is really impacted. And it's not uncommon for teams to validate individual areas, such as screening, but then overlook other integrations like customs only to encounter issues later on during the project. Um, and then lastly, there's also the assumption that processes will remain largely unchanged between GTS 11 and GTS E4H. Because it's still SAP, there's often an expectation that the system will work the same way. But in reality, it's more comparable to the shift from ECC to S4. So while the system may look familiar, its behavior can be quite different. But ultimately, to sum it up, awareness is critical. The earlier this is understood, the smoother and more predictable the project tends to be.
Yeah. And let's get into the conversion part. I mean, it does not seem easy, and but please, I'm excited for you guys to give me an analysis on this because I think that companies need to hear what their approach could look like, what options do they have? And that's why you guys are here to talk about it. And I'm so grateful for that, because I think maybe it'll give people a peace of mind, because it seems like it is, as you said, it's not just an upgrade, right? It's a whole transformation. But with a transformation comes also error, or comes, things that can go wrong. And I think that's where companies mostly, think about, oh, do we need to do this conversion? But what options do companies have when converting from GTS 11 to GTS for HANA?
So there are
Yeah.
several approaches, and each comes with trade-offs. There is brownfield, greenfield, selective, with or without parallel landscape, etc. So brownfield is the most straightforward. It converts your existing system, it's quicker and keeps your data, but it also carries over complexity. If your source system is messy, you bring the mess into Edition for HANA. For example, a system with inconsistent master data in a brownfield approach, all those inconsistencies remain and causes issues in further processes. Clear. As well as implemented and unused coding, a huge unnecessary overhead. Another subject here with a parallel landscape, we are more flexible. You build a new project system line and migrate gradually. This reduces risks because your productive line stays active and intact. But it's more expensive for sure and requires managing two system lines temporarily. A sandbox is something I strongly recommend. It allows the team, especially basis employees, to practice the conversion and gain experience in a non-integrated environment. We always say better one conversion too many than one too few. Running a sandbox, then the dev system, then the quality system, and even a mock run of the productive GTS before go live helps reduce risks significantly. And finally, there's also the greenfield and the selective approach, depending on how much data you want to migrate at all. One important point, lower complexity doesn't mean lower risks. Sometimes a simple approach like brownfield can actually increase risks in your starting point if your starting point isn't clean at all.
I love that you just mentioned excess coding, or creating overhead, and I think that goes into my next questions, which is kind of risk and downtime, but also error, right? Or just overhead that you mentioned. Where do projects usually run into trouble in this conversion?
Yeah, again, great question. Thanks for that. So most issues come down to preparation. Preparation is key. Now, as mentioned earlier, if your master data isn't clean, your custom code isn't reviewed, those problems are carried forward, especially in brownfield conversions. I mean, we already talked about this. Have a clear project plan with buffers included. Another subject I really recommend. Share and discuss progress during regular status meetings to be able to provide each stakeholder with an up-to-date status at any time. Christine talked about this already. Testing is another major risk area. It's not enough to test individual components. You need to do full end-to-end testings, and not just IT testings, but real business scenarios provided by the experienced business users. Another really big challenge is overlapping projects. Yeah, if your ERP system is being updated at the same time, and it's pretty common to use a huge program for all your systems to be converted, or interfaces are renewed, it creates additional dependencies for sure. Yeah, we've seen projects almost fail because updates in one system weren't properly coordinated with GTS. Yeah? And finally, over. Many teams underestimated it. A good cutover plan is very detailed. It defines exactly who does what, at which time, and for how long, for the whole go-live process.
Yeah.
Without that, it risk delays, fusion, and extended downtimes.
And that sounds terrible in trade. It sounds like a nightmare, really. I mean, I don't think companies can afford that with the delays tariffs already provide. The delays, the trade disruptions. We have a lot of trade disruptions out there right now. On the water, whether it is on the water, whether it is, new regulations that are keeping businesses kind of back from running running their supply chain smoothly. Now, something that I want to mention, and I think that is one thing everyone questions, and I question that as well a lot with any system integration or any system conversion, is the governance of it. So governance is often emphasized, but I feel like it's also a necessity. But what does strong conversion governance actually look like in practice? What do you guys tell your clients?
I would say good governance means clear ownership, structured processes, and strong communication. You really need defined roles also in a project, so such as program lead, IT, business, compliance, and then also clear decision-making paths for those people. Um, Another really helpful thing with governance is a communication matrix and also a central document repository are also essential so everyone has access to material. And additionally, projects should always follow structured phases. So from sandbox to testing to go live with clear entry and exit criteria is very important. But the one thing I'll say most importantly is that business teams should be involved from the very beginning, not just in the testing phase. They should be brought in right when the GTS E4H conversion is starting and not down the line.
Yeah, I think that's a great tip. Let's talk about the compliance and business impact of it. So, obviously, trade compliance has day-to-day processes. How does the conversion impact these processes day to day? Does it change anything? Is there a concern to be had? What?
Mhm. I would say that foreign trade teams, they feel the impact immediately. The biggest change is the move to Fiori. So instead of multiple SAP GUI transactions, users now work with apps and dashboards in GTS E4H. So for example, in GTS 11, releasing block documents might involve switching between several transactions, but in E4H, this can be handled in a single app, which is great, but users need to learn this new workflow. There are also changes in data requirements. So, a good example of this is product retention period in the preference service. So, this concept really didn't exist in GTS 11, but in E4H, it becomes mandatory and must be maintained in several instances. And then another impact is monitoring. So, users now rely more on dashboards instead of manual checks, and that improves visibility, but again, it requires training. So after go live, there's usually a significant learning phase for users. We often see increased support tickets, we see more exceptions, and we see a slight productivity dip as users get used to the system. But that's all normal. It just needs to be planned for.
That's interesting. And it's nice that you say that because, I mean, it's giving a heads up, right, to these companies or, users. Now, let's go into some real lessons that you've learned because I think that's how companies can get kind of a real life intake of this. Based on some projects that you've worked with, what are the biggest lessons that you've learned throughout your time?
Yeah, the biggest lesson is start earlier than you think. Don't wait.
So now, basically.
Exactly, yeah. So data preparation is often underestimated, as well as the involvement of all relevant stakeholders. Bring them in, all of them, as early as possible, and be mindful of their level of knowledge. So without someone with years of hands-on experience with customers' GTS and feeder systems, the conversion itself is very challenging. We experienced that. Another key lesson is don't skip the sandbox due to time or monetary aspects. The sandbox phase allows you to test assumptions like how screening behaves or how license determination works without business pressure. And for example, one customer discovers unexpected differences in the sandbox compared to the previous system version, which they were able to analyze and fix early, avoiding major issues later. So start early, avoid extensive major issues later. Reconnecting broker systems or customs platforms usually takes longer time than internal systems. If you bring them in late, it will delay your project for sure. And finally, expect change. Even with good planning, things will come up for sure. So build some buffers into your timeline to hold the all in all timeline from start to the end to the go live.
I think change is good. That's what I say. Change is good. Now, I'm sure people are wondering what the realistic timeline of this would be. Now, in trade, we don't seem to get a timeline ever nowadays because we don't even know what's going to happen next. But that is why you stay prepared with the right system, because at least then you can control, your processes and, day to day trade compliance efforts. Now, what realistic timeline for a GTS S4HANA? Wow, I keep it's like E4H, but S4HANA. I don't get that. Why?
No,
I struggle with that.
it's not S4. It's not S4. It's global GTS edition for SAP HANA.
Okay.
S4 is the feeder system, and it's not
Okay,
in
I
the
see.
name.
See, thank you. Okay, I'm gonna say just E4H, but I'm sure the listener is wondering that as well. Hopefully, I'm not alone. Now, now getting back to the question, what's a realistic timeline for GTS E4H conversion, and what factors influence it most? And I think the factors would be the priority in this question.
hmm Absolutely. Yeah. I would say typically a project ranges from 6 to 12 months, but it really depends on complexity. So, to gauge how complex a GTS E4H conversion may be for a company, we usually ask right off the bat which services are implemented and in which legal areas.
Mhm.
For example, if a company uses standard customs processes in the US or in the EU, we can estimate relatively quickly what a realistic timeline may be for them. But on the other hand, if there are custom built solutions like specific processes for smaller or less standardized countries, then we need deeper analysis before we can even define the timeline. And I would say the biggest drivers of delays in timelines are data issues, integration challenges, and testing cycles. And also, one important lesson is that aggressive timelines usually fail. There are always unexpected issues, so it's better to plan realistically and include buffers, which I know Robert mentioned already, rather than rushing and risking problems later on.
Yeah, exactly. And therefore, we have our so-called conversion advisory or transition advisory. So months before the actual project starts, we have a 1 or 2 day on-site workshop with the customers to get an overall overview of the whole GTS system, including all connected in-house and third-party system. So the outcome afterwards is not just the first version of a project plan, but also the definition of work packages for each involved party with detailed estimation of certain efforts. And therefore, we can build our project on these outcomes.
That sounds beautiful when it's done right and when it's done
Yeah.
correctly. Exactly. I think a lot of people want to get things done like now. But again, I think failing is worse than it taking a longer time.
Yeah.
So might as well do it the correct way. So I'm glad you mentioned that. Now, I also obviously want to talk about a successful E4H outcome, right? Um, I'm sure you've experienced this, which I would love for you to share what a successful E4H environment looks like, 3 to 6 months after they go live. So they've gone through the conversion, gone live. What does it look like in 3 to 6 months?
Yeah, so after 3 to 6 months, you typically see stable processes, you see lower exception rates, you see a stronger adoption of Fiori as users get used to the system. You see a more improved visibility through the dashboards that Fiori offers, and also reduced manual work. And interestingly, a few months down the line, once users do get comfortable, they often start suggesting further optimizations in the system to help
Oh,
them.
that's nice. Okay,
Yeah.
that's nice that they get to do that, right? Yeah, and I love that you said feeling comfortable because it does take some time. Like
Mm.
every single change that we do, and there's so many changes at the moment in trade, it takes so much time. Fortunately, things change so fast that once you do get comfortable right now, you have to adjust again. And so I think they've gotten really comfortable with change. That's another reason why I would propose, if you are at GTS 11, take on the change, do something good for your company if it works for you, obviously. And I'll add that later in a question, actually, because I have a bonus question for our listeners. Now, if a company is just starting to think about the GTS 11 to EH4, what would be your top advice? And is it a non-negotiable? I have to add that. Is it a non-negotiable to do this conversion? In your words, opinion.
I'll offer my top advice first.
Okay.
So my top advice is, one is start with a clear understanding of your system landscape. So how many interfaces, some code that you have, and data sources. Second advice is assess risk before choosing an approach. And this is risks across the board. You need to assess technical risk. You need to assess operational risk. You also need to assess regulatory risks. Third piece of advice is treat this as a transformation and not just an upgrade. I know we've said that a lot, but it's really important to say it again.
You can't say it often enough.
Yes. And then for the fourth one, I would say invest time in planning. It really reduces risks and it improves outcomes significantly when you have a great plan for the conversion project. In terms of the question you asked, if this conversion is non-negotiable, I would say, in my opinion, I think it is non-negotiable because it's SAP's path forward is their roadmap is to move to GTS E4H, and they're no longer supporting GTS 11 with regular updates. So it's really important that companies move over to this new system. But Robert, I don't know if you have anything else you want to add there too.
Yeah, exactly. So for example, from customs service perspective, we are dependent on the customs systems from the several countries and their governments. So in the US from CBP, and when CBP upgrades their system in the future, these upgrades from source system perspective, so from GTS, will only provide it for GTS edition for HANA and not for GTS 11 from SAP anymore.
Yeah.
And therefore, from this perspective, it's crucial to move forward.
Yeah, look, the easiest way, guys, to describe. Again, I'm going to have to start with my phone. No, I love it. I think I get it anyways, the way you're saying it. But to make it, you guys, if you use your iPhone and you see emojis and people upgrade their phone or, convert to the new version, and you cannot see this emoji, that's terrible. You have to convert. I mean, you cannot stay back. And not even to be mentioned that your phone will just flat on die all the time if you don't do this conversion. So I I love that what you said, and I definitely understand. To me, hearing it, and again, I am not advising anything. It sounds like a non-negotiable if I understood everything correctly that you guys kind of provided. Now, looking ahead, I love looking ahead in trade because there's a lot of uncertainties, but it seems like there's also a lot of positives coming with GTS and especially how it is evolving and how E4H, is now their next step forward. But how do you see global trade and GTS evolving over the next few years?
Yeah, on one hand, or in general, global trade will become more complex due to increasing regulations. Yeah, history showed that. Automation and AI, we talked about this, will play a huge role, including something that is currently still beyond imagination. It grows so fast. And on the other hand, there's a strong push towards standard processes, and GTS will clearly remain SAP's prioritized central platform for global trade in the future. That's for sure.
Yeah, I can see it moving forward, especially because just technological systems have a place in trade, and they're barely fine. I mean, I'm sure GTS, SAP GTS has been a little more consistent than AI, because AI is barely coming into the space. I don't want to say barely, it's been, but it's not as accepted yet, I would say. So I think there's a lot of growth I see in this area. Now, to round this up, if listeners take one thing away from this episode, what should it be? whoever wants to
If
take it.
Yes. If listeners take one thing away from this episode, it should be that a GTS E4H conversion will be successful, but only if it's approached with structure, with realism, and also with a strong focus on risk and governance.
Right. And I suppose that that you guys are here to help, right? If there's more questions, or if there's any difficulties, I'm sure there's isolated questions that companies have that are only true for them, or they don't see other companies having those kind of issues, or whatnot. So corporate business solutions is obviously there to provide that this help, right?
Yes, for sure. If you have challenges in this area in GTS, not just for upgrades, just as well for other GTS topics and challenges, yeah, reach out to us. Don't hesitate. Yeah, we are
Yeah,
here for
and
you.
we'll have this all linked below. And I want to thank you guys so much. I definitely have a much better understanding of what SAP GTS is in general, but how crucial it is, to stay updated and to know when change is coming, and to know when to go with the change and move forward, and that it's not easy. I mean, it's easier said than done, right? We can say, okay, you should convert.
Yeah.
Well, it's a whole transformation of a company. But ultimately, I think staying behind is hurts more than
Yeah.
transitioning and kind of, going through maybe not I don't want to call it a struggle, but a path of the unknown of on how to truly convert. Um, is it? I have to ask: is it like
Mm.
one type of fix for all, or is it very itemized for each company, like a conversion?
Yeah, I would say it's very itemized, because some companies, they may have customs processes across the globe. They might be shipping to India or just to the European
Right.
Union, or so it really depends on what their global footprint is, and which processes of GTS they will use. If it's compliance, if it's customs, if it's
Hmm.
preference, there's a lot of aspects that add to that, and so you can't approach every company the same.
Christine, what you said is absolutely right, and each customer has to be seen individual. But from our experience of dozens of fulfilled and finished conversions, we have a stock of standardized processes we are include already in our conversions. So we do not start from scratch like in the beginning, like everybody does and did in the beginning. So therefore, we bring already our experiences with us, and on this we build up the project with the individual challenges from the customer.
Right. Now, one
Yeah.
last question. It just came to me. Sorry, you guys can definitely say, "Oh my God, this don't want to answer." Um, Now, okay, we kept talking about GTS, no, SAP GTS 11 conversion to GTS E4H. Now, what if it's non-existent and can they go straight to the GTS E4H? Is that like a thing? Do you need to you obviously don't need to go to 11 and then go to E4H, right? You go straight to E4H. Like if you buy a new iPhone, you're going to get the new version immediately.
Yeah, you don't have to having GTS 11 isn't a prerequisite for
Right.
getting GTS E4H. We can do a conversion for a company if they're on a different system and then move them to GTS
Right.
E4H.
Yes.
They don't have to be on 11 beforehand.
Okay, and it's even nice that you said that. So you can be on a different system and you can change it to your system. Okay, that's probably a different conversation, actually. But I appreciate you adding that, and I want to
Yeah.
round it up. This is a longer episode than I usually have, but I think it's an
Mm.
also more extensive, more technical episode, which I very much appreciated. I think the
Mhm.
information given was so good, and I hope you, the listener, took a lot away from that. And maybe if you're not in charge of making decisions on whether you can implement a new system or a conversion, you can take this up to your upper level and maybe show them this episode, or kind of take notes and say, look, we need to convert, and because we do see see some type of delays or challenges right now with the older system. So again, thank you, Christine, and thank you, Robert. I appreciate you guys for coming on. And I
Annik,
want to
thank
thank
you.
Corporate Business Solutions for sponsoring this episode as well, which you guys are obviously a part of. And to our listeners of Simply Trade, thank you so much. As you guys know, we reached 500 episodes, I think like a few episodes ago, which is insane. And if you've been a listener from the beginning, that, I mean, I should find some of these because that's just incredible. And if you are, maybe you should let me know on LinkedIn and I can, I don't know, give you some swag or something. Again, thank you so much for listening, and I will be back next Monday. And to you guys, I hope you have a great week.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you.